on my end. This is your co-host Phil, and with me as always is
Tom. Welcome to the show, Pop in the Morning, where we rub our eyes, we try to focus in the light of a brand new day upon the pop culture that made us who we are, the pop culture that informed our view of the world. You think about like the TV screens, the movie screens, these days the phone screens that we look through to sort of like experience the world. It's what a previous generation would have done out the window of their house or off the front porch. It's what we now do vicariously through characters. And Pop of the Morning is all about grabbing a cup of coffee. It's all about talking it out and trying to make sense of all of these myriad of influences that shape our lives. Yeah? That's the show, I think. Yeah.
No, I agree. And today we've got a very life-shaping film for both of us,
really influential.
Which is Rushmore.
Rushmore by Wes
Anderson.
Anderson. It's his second film from 1998. It's the film I feel that it did not, on its release, did not make a huge splash. But I think it's one of those films that in those early days of DVD became a cult film of some sort. And I think that Wes Anderson really, he really comes into his creative own on this. His first film, Bottle Rocket, was fantastic, but little seen. Yeah. Rushmore, a little bit more widely distributed by the Walt Disney Company, and all of the pieces of his greatness are here. But it was his next film, The Royal Tenenbaums, which really kind of broke him into the mainstream. But this is this important bridge, I think, on DVD, on VHS, where like the audience, you and I, were raring to go and saw Royal Tenenbaums on its opening weekend based on our experience seeing this film on home media.
Yeah, this is a film that came out right towards probably
our freshman year of high school.
Last few years, yeah. But it's like it's starting to become like, rental is still at its height, but it's going to be
probably its
fading
peak.
out pretty
its apotheosis,
quickly.
The era before streaming, the final, like, let's say half decade before streaming.
Yeah, it's one of those that we were just lucky enough we were in the right age to find it.
It's a movie that I loved so much. It was probably my first purchase as a part. It's the first Criterion Collection DVD that I owned. I remember shelling out a little extra for this one because I loved the cover art by Wes Anderson's brother. This kind of twee style. There's Max Fischer as one of the Yankee racers. It's just such a great style, and it was one of the prizes of my DVD collection back when that was more of a going concern.
Yeah, I mean, I still think about. I have no, like right now, I don't think I have any real DVDs sitting around, but that's like the one thing that I consider buying. I know once I do it, I'll go crazy with Criterion. But Wes Anderson stuff is always like in the back of my mind because I watch it, a couple times. I feel like every few years I'll just get on a streak of Wes Anderson stuff, and that's what it felt like when I was prepping for this show. I watched it like first thing in the morning, and it was hard to have the critical eye that I usually do for films because this is like so nostalgic, and I think it's so good. And I was just sitting there enjoying it. I was just sitting there with like a big smile on my face. It was a complete movie experience that you have, like that. People often think about or I think people who love films think about when they think about movies. They like sit there and they're just lost in it, and they get lost in the story for an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever. And that was my experience when I was watching.
I can't disagree on so many levels. On the nostalgia level, for sure, which I think we've already established. Just our deep relationship with this film and with Wes Anderson as a filmmaker, with Jason Schwartzman and and Bill Murray, and just the whole knockout cast in this film, but also just the film itself, the filmmaking, right, is I hate to say it's literary because we're kind of crossing streams there, right? But it is, like in the tradition of the best kind of novel. There's so much subtlety and craft where there's the beauty of what's on the page or on the screen, but then there's also the beauty of what's like left unspoken and unsaid, the things you don't necessarily even have words for, but you just know. I think about the characterization and the direction of this film, how you feel like you get a sense of these characters, some characters with only a line or two, through their body language, through the way that they're framed. It's just such an articulate piece of filmmaking. There are plenty of films that I've seen, I think, that are called great films. And I think this is a film that's only going to continue to, to grow in terms of its reputation and its eminence over the decades. Like, it's truly a great film. Yeah, it's one of the great films.
I think so.
I mean, now that we've heaped all that praise on, right? I think we've laid our cards firmly on the table about how we feel about this.
Yeah.
But let's try to complicate this a little bit. Let's as we do on this show, right? We've established our bias, we've established our relationship with this film. But as I said in the introduction, right? I'm sure most people tuning into this feel similar about Wes Anderson. If you're here, you probably already know what Rushmore is, and you probably already respect it as a film.
Yeah.
And if not, thanks for giving this a chance. Welcome to the show. But our job is to complicate that a little bit, which isn't to say to pick it apart in a negative way, but film criticism in the most true sense of the word, where we're asking these questions about what exactly is the material that this is made of, what is the thread count, so to speak, on these sheets, right? Now that we've bedded down with this movie, what exactly is it? Phil, did anything strike you as you were watching this again, revisiting this film for the production of this episode?
Yeah, he stood out. Both Murray and Schwartzman playing Max Fischer and Murray playing Herman Blume, both of those characters were much less heroic to me than they were in the past. As a younger man in the teens and 20s when I was watching this, you look to Max Fischer and being, oh my God, he's such a rebel and he's so cool and defiant and he's doing these weird, cool projects that we love to do. But God, he is so messed up too. He is so
he's a very messed up kid.
And you said this to me about Urkel when I was going on to Urkel. It's like he's a teenager, comes flex. So I thought about that. I'm like, okay, Max Fischer is 15. I'll try to not be as hard as I was on Urkel. But then you got Herman Blume, who becomes best friends with his 15-year-old. And Blume, I think, is like 40s,
he's in
50s,
his 50s
something like
at
that.
least, yeah.
And he's just as fucked up, as messed up as Max Fischer. And you're just sitting there going, this is, as much as you want to root for these characters, it's also kind of like I don't know if Wes Anderson and Owen Wilson, the writers of the script, meant this, but it's almost like a telling on, which we've discussed often, but it's just telling on men and our sometimes inability, or not inability, but we don't need to grow up. We don't need to be older. Because my mom used to call my dad he's perpetually 7 in a lot of ways. Like he's just a child in a grown up's body. He does work, he's responsible and stuff like that, but he's also got like very childish. And I've seen that with a lot of men of older generations, and even myself when I was younger. We have this like immaturity to us. And Rosemary played by Olivia Williams, calls both of them. It's like, you're both children. You're both little
Phil,
children.
as always, you've hit on a lot there in that opening salvo. I think that's a profound insight. We live, American society. I mean, don't let certain politicians hear me say this, but we live in a white patriarchy, and proof of that is the fact that men like Herman Blume and Max Fischer, men like you or me, let's face it, are not really forced to, let's say, grapple with maturity. We're not really forced to change by the outside world, because we live in a world, we live in a system, we live in a country that is in so many ways historically has been defined by people who look like Max Fischer, by people who look like Herman Blume. And so since they're the ones making the rules, they tend to make the world conform to themselves, right? So I think that's one profound insight, and I think that's I think that is baked into this movie. I think that, I was in prepping for this episode, I went back and I looked at a clip from the Charlie Rose show, where he's interviewing Wes Anderson, a young Wes Anderson. He literally has short hair and geeky Max Fischer style glasses almost. And he's talking about this movie. It's got to be maybe one of his first television interviews. And Wes Anderson, in commenting on the character of Max Fischer, said, the idea was to make a character and a movie that I would have thought was cool when I was 15. And so, I think, in terms of like his aspiration there, I think you just said it really well, and we alluded to that in the opening of this show. We were that kid in terms of we thought this was the coolest movie and the coolest character and the coolest people when we were 15. But I would say also, to Wes Anderson and Owen Wilson's credit, that the movie complicates all of that, and it does it in a subtle way that you can love this movie when you're 15. And now that you and I are much closer in age to Herman Blume than we are to Max Fischer, that's a little bit of a disorienting fact to recognize. Right? I recognized watching this how much Max Fischer and Herman Blume are the same man, the same person, at on different sides of the mountain, so to speak, right? Max Fischer is ascending the mountain of his life. Herman Blume arguably has passed the peak, and he's maybe on this downward slope. He's over the hill, is what they used to say about people turning 40, I think. Yeah. You're over the hill. You don't hear that so much anymore as the baby boomers have gotten older. I think they put the kibosh on that phrase. But very much they're still children. They are, let's look at this, right? Max is a lower class kid. He's the son of a barber who tells everybody that his dad is a neurosurgeon. He's in this really blue collar school because of the scholarship he got based on his raw talent, his raw promise. It's the stuff of the American dream. He's a kid who's making it on his own raw grit, talent, and determination. But part of the tragedy of the character, right, is that he's trying to convince everyone that he not only belongs in this upper crust institution, that is Rushmore, filmed at St. Mark's, which was the actual school that Wes Anderson and Owen Wilson attended as students. Owen Wilson was also kicked out in 10th grade, just like Max Fischer. Yeah. But Max Fischer, he's trying to show not only that he belongs here, right, that he's as good as anybody else in this school, but that he's better than them, that he's the best, in fact. He's the president of the beekeepers and the thespian society, the founder of this club and that one, the model airplane club, right, with 3 hours in the air. It's these sort of oh my God. Yeah. This huge list of achievements, his resume that opens the movie. But it's also hollow, right? He has this omnidirectional ambition. But in a lot of ways, none of the grit or determination to see any of this stuff through toward mastery or excellence. right? He dabbles in a million things, which I know you and I, there's a certain degree to which that defines you and I. It's a very American or maybe male, a certain kind of male feeling of like, I want to be good at everything, but don't really want to put in the work to master any one thing. And Herman Blume is on the other side of that, right? He's a self-made millionaire, they make reference to. His chapel speech at the beginning, right? He started his life out not so different from Max, the working class kid, you get the impression. And he climbed the ranks. He tells his advice to the kids in the chapel is, literally for the poor kids in this audience, take aim on the rich kids, get them in your sight, and take them out, because they don't have the fire in their belly, right? And he's done it. He did it. He's a self-made millionaire. He's got the house. He's got the business. He's got the car. But he's found his dream empty. His trophy case is tarnished. All the trophies in his case. His sons are shallow. His wife is cheating on him, like right in front of him. He's wearing these great, like, trashy Bud Light swimming trunks, and dives into this dirty pool full of, like, dead leaves, and floats at the bottom, like in this great homage to The Graduate, right? I love that shot where he's floating at the bottom of the pool, isolated at this gray party on a gray afternoon, like Dustin Hoffman in his scuba suit at the bottom of the pool, right? It's this essential hollowness of the accomplishment for accomplishment's sake. Right? And the emptiness of this, like, American dream of climbing the social ladder, of acquisition and status. There's just this profound melancholy about the film, and this profound ambivalence about this idea of the way we seek trophies and the way that we seek accomplishment and maybe recognition for that accomplishment. And the way all of that is so unsatisfying in the end. The way it's a very hollow pursuit.
Yeah. On the flip side of it, I also think of, like, Max Fischer, portraying showing how standardized grades and classes can not work for everybody.
Yeah.
Max Fischer, when he's set on something, he does get into it. When he's getting the aquarium ready, you see him studying. You see him taking notes.
He's a genius.
You see him, like, organizing. He organizes this whole groundbreaking ceremony without the headmaster knowing anything about it, or the coach who runs the baseball diamond knowing anything about it.
My sources indicated there would be piranhas.
Yeah. Who told you that? He's this brilliant organizer and communicator who gets
dreams
stuff
big,
done.
Man. He dreams big, and not only does he dream big, he's got the ability to organize it and make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and at the end of the day, that's what, at least here in America, a lot of people are looking for when it comes to job or it comes to employees and stuff like that, or what you think about
the hustler, the con man,
Elon, hustler, the hustler, the con man. It's the American dream to be the hustler and the con man. It's
fuck it,
but
build it anyway.
He's got the skills. He's got the skill set to do it. But he also uses that stuff for nefarious, reasons when he's trying to pick up on Rosemary Cross, who's like twice his age at least. But you also see Blume doing the same thing. But it's interesting to see these guys because we don't see how Blume, got to where he is on top in the. I think it's like the steel industry.
It's a steel, It's a steel industry.
He does something with.
He has a steel plant. I can tell because of the great insert for the Criterion Collection DVD. This is not a Criterion sponsored podcast, but it comes with this awesome map, and it shows Herman Blume's steel mill over here, right below the Grover Cleveland High School, which is behind the chain link fence and like razor wire that looks like a prison. Yeah. But yeah, there's Herman Blume's steel mill. Sorry, you were saying steel mill.
Cool. Yeah. No, that's all right. But he rose to being a millionaire, multimillionaire. He had the $10 million. He was worth $10 million. You know, before he started putting money into the aquarium.
$10 million.
And yeah, only $10 million. But we know what it takes in America. You know, being aware of capitalism, and you know who you have to step on and who you have to take advantage of in order to accumulate $10 million. I mean, he was probably very hustler-minded, con man-minded, making deals and exploiting employees and all kinds of junk like that. So it's weird. You see these traits that are both like, in one light they're horrible, but in another light they're really wonderful. And it's just how these characters use them and their purpose and their I don't know, not personality, but their attitude, I guess, towards the world that really changes, and is really the main problem, I guess. You know, but you see this.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. But I was going to say, but I mean, the great thing about this film is that you do see some kind of redemption arc for the characters. But I will say that at the end of that arc, I'm not 100% convinced of the redemption of Max Fischer. I am a little of Herman Blume. He spent $8 million of his $8 million, and he seems to be taking stuff in. I'm not 100% convinced of Max Fischer being.
Well, let's put a pin in that, Phil. You have a history on this show of abusing children. Maybe I should clarify on that. You have a history of being very hard on kids. I am
critical of you.
So let's, Well, I think there may be some self-loathing there.
I'm not critical of,
perhaps.
I'm critical of fictional.
Well, let's talk about this, right?
That's
so
my
you
problem.
Touch again, as always, upon a lot of really interesting threads there. We kind of started this conversation talking about the fact that Max and Herman live in a world, to a certain extent, live in our society, right? There's stylized elements of this film, but really on the margins, they live in our world, which is a patriarchal, white male world, which, as you said, it sort of rewards them for not growing up, they sort of rewards some of these worst characteristics of these two characters. Yeah. You know, and I think that's brought to the fore in this movie by, you know, like, for example, the distinct lack of women in this film. If you stop and think about it, there is only one female character who really appears on screen. Actually, in really, well, there are two female characters that have any kind of depth to them. Namely, Miss Cross, who is the center of kind of this love triangle between Herman and Max. And then there is, of course, also Margaret Yang, Max's later would-be girlfriend. And I think those are the only two females who have any substantial role in the film. Max's mom is dead, which is also, of course, like, you know, the wife of his father is gone. And Herman's wife barely is present, but what we know of her is that she doesn't love her husband, or that their relationship has crumbled, that she's not emotionally invested in this. And to be fair, it doesn't seem like Herman's particularly emotionally invested in it either. It's a crippled, withered relationship. I don't mean to demonize her, but it's a relationship that's dysfunctional, let's put it that way. And so the absence of women in this world, right? It's a world of boys who look like men, and they're playthings, and they're playing pretend, they're fantasies, right? I was thinking about this movie, I used this word earlier, but I was thinking about this movie and how really it's about the way we, you know, and this can be a collective we, it can be a more narrow we in the sense of men, the way we seek trophies, the way we try to have it all, the way we dabble instead of focus on excellence. We want the reward, we want the title, we want the payday, but we don't really want to put the time and the effort in, but we want the recognition, right? And that's, if you think about it, that's kind of what a trophy symbolizes. But also it's about the way that we treat love and women in addition to accomplishments as trophies, right? Miss Cross is a character with depth. You know, we know that she lost her husband. We know that she is deeply sentimental. She seems like a very sweet, earnest, and idealistic, giving person in terms of the way we see her behaving in class. She seems like a wonderful person. But for most of the movie, neither Max nor Herman Blume see her as much more than something to be acquired, something to be won over. Right? They don't really see her as a three-dimensional person with her own aspirations, feelings, desires, with her own free will. You know, there's that great scene where Max is in the library. He's maneuvered this thing, which wasn't really a thing, where he's going to be her teacher's assistant. She says, "Do we have that here?" He said, I can make it happen. I'm on scholarship. I can make it happen. Which, again, is his attitude. I don't care what the rules are. I will change the rules so that I can do what I want. Again, this white patriarchal attitude of entitlement. And he's sitting there attentively watching her. She takes one sip of her lemonade. He runs over and he's filling it again. And she says something about, "Max, we don't have a relationship." And he says, "Well, you know, do you want me to grab a dictionary, right? We're friends, aren't we?"
Yeah.
Because that's all I meant by relationship.
That's what it really
Do you want me to grab a dictionary?
Yeah, this is it's a conniving little word play that you get from, you know, jerks.
Right. And you know, it's I think about the way that he regards her as yet another, like, line next to his name in the yearbook, so to speak, right? She is a replacement for his mother. That vehicle where like he doesn't have this core of love, friendship, relationship in his life. Max has no real friends apart from Dirk Calloway, this like little kid. And even that seems to be about the status he gets, at least in part about the status he gets from being able to kind of flirt with Dirk's mother. His relationship with his father seems barely existent. His father's quite loving and supportive, but also, like, Max seems embarrassed by his father, and they don't seem to have a ton of emotional intimacy, right? And he senses all of this. He places all of this burden on Miss Cross, you know, inappropriately, regardless of whether she wants this or not. I don't know. I was just struck by, and then Herman Blume does the exact same thing, right? In his failing marriage. He senses her warmth and kindness. She is literally the heart at the center of this movie, right? She's kind to these men. Right? She doesn't want anything from these men, and the fact that she doesn't want anything from these men is exactly the thing, I guess, maybe that they also find so irresistible about her. That she's kind and generous with no strings attached. She's a generous friend. And these men who are obsessed with trophies are like, man, right? Like, I could win her over and add her to the case, put her up on the shelf, and they're drawn to her like a moth to a flame because of, like, she's the only sense of warmth in a lot of ways in this film.
Yeah, it's crazy. Her interactions with them, she's like, it feels like overly nice to them. She, especially to Max Fischer, she you know, cares for him when there are times that she should have, like, really pushed him away, but she gives him the benefit of the doubt because she's like, well,
she's essentially a good person. She's a kind and nurturing person. She's like, she's like the ideal teacher, right?
Which Max Fischer, which Max Fischer sees as, you know, some kind of interest in him, or, you know, vulnerability. I'm not sure what he sees
mom.
in it.
I think he sees mom, if I'm being honest.
Yeah,
he sees the mom that he lost when he was a kid.
That's probably true. That's probably true. I mean, but it really is interesting that the lack of women and representation in this film. Like, it struck me at the end of the film when they're panning across the audience, you know, right before the curtain goes up for the or before Max Fischer comes in to introduce his
Heaven
new
and Hell.
Vietnam War play, Heaven and Hell.
There are safety goggles and head and hearing protection. Please feel free to use them.
Yeah, hearing protection. Yeah, but they're scanning across the audience, and I think for the most part, the only people who speak are the men who have, and even if they have like a small role, like the guy who was like, you know, helping build, or like the planner for the aquarium. He's like, the city plan. The plan should have been submitted to the city. That was like his second, I think, his second line in the whole film. But he had that speaking, and every single one of them, all the men had one, and all the women were just kind of or they were paying attention to the men, like the what's the guy's name? The
Headmaster by Brian Cox, right?
Yeah,
Guggenheim.
Guggenheim. He's like, open that playbill.
Turn it.
Okay,
he's
close.
like
I see
from stroke.
Yeah, turn it. Yeah, and his wife is like doing this,
frantically paging.
I'm just like,
well,
yeah, and it was such a weird representation of this film of like, this is about boys more than anything else, because the conversations they're having and the interactions they're having while there's this panning is just like boy talk. It's not like mature.
It's in a lot of ways, again, it's the world of things, the world of accomplishments, the world of rules and regulations made by men. You know, you could regard the lack of women, so to speak, in this film as a weakness, as an oversight. But I really don't think it is. I think there's not much in this movie that's not everything in this movie, I think, is a very distinct and careful choice. And I think that the choice to focus so squarely on these men is a very deliberate one. I think that's part and parcel of this larger idea. The kind of movie that when you're 15 you would think is awesome, right? The kind of person you think you want to be when you're 15, right? But what I love about this movie is, you alluded to this arc of redemption, which I think also applies to Max, and not just Harold, but also to Max. I think that arc of redemption, right, is really that, like, you can get drawn into the playthings of this movie. Max with his literal plays, right? It's his way of the way a little boy with his action figures can control and manifest their imagination, the storyline. He's taking control of and manifesting the life around him. His plays are always very real, close reflections of what's going on in his life at the time. They're metaphors for his experiences. He gets sent to the rough school, the quote-unquote rough public school, and all of a sudden he has this very, like, arch, over-the-top representation of, like, gang violence. What is that play is called? Like, it's Little Juan and 40 Ounce is the name of that play. It's this caricature of, like, Chicano gangs, and he's suddenly playing this guy with just his top button done, and he's driving some kind of, you know, whatever lowrider is the impression, right? And he's buying root beers for the crowd. I don't want one. Or for the crew. I don't want one. You know, he does these plays to kind of cope with this life that otherwise feels beyond his emotional grasp. He's trying to make sense of, you know, I spoke at the beginning about this, the lyricism of this film, the unspoken stuff that's sort of carried on, if you will, in the harmonies, the melodies, the unspoken parts, right? And Max doesn't have words for those things either. And his plays are his way of trying to to represent the feelings or the awareness that there are deeper things at work here. His missing his mother, right? His lack of a mother figure. His maybe dawning realization that his hollow pursuit of status and trophies for trophies' sake is not particularly gratifying. You know, the play is his trophy case in a way, right? And he's trying to step back and really take stock of what he's got there, and it's never quite satisfying until this last play, Heaven and Hell, which is like his masterwork. He's got like a case of dynamite.
15 sticks of dynamite. Jesus.
And it's, again, this it's really this absurd thing, and it ties together so much of what you've seen in the movie. The characters are speaking Latin. He brings in Magnus, this bully that has terrorized him through the film. He's got Dirk Calloway, his sidekick, who is now Shark Boy. Sick Transit Gloria, Surf Boy. Sick Transit Glory fades, right? It's the callback to him saving Latin. Why does he save Latin? Literally only to impress Miss Cross, right? Like, it's 100% about the accomplishment as a talisman for like your masculinity and your self-worth.
I find it funny that both he and Fisher and Blume get caught up in this, because I remember doing this when I was younger, of like writing a poem for somebody, or making a mixtape, or doing this thing for a young woman that you're interested in, and being like, this is how I have her show interest in me, or whatever. You
can swoon now.
But they're doing it to a larger...
Here's the glory, the great act that is supposed to make you...
I'm doing this for you, even though you aren't...
I never asked for an aquarium.
You aren't even aware of it.
I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure how that rumor got started. I never asked for an aquarium.
Yeah. So good.
But I think the redemptive arc there, right, is at the end, that in a certain way, right, Harold Blume has given up. He's realized that he can't win Miss Cross over through these great, quote unquote gallant acts, these huge things that are supposed to be so impressive. And he's effectively given up on her. And here's the thing, right? Max stages this huge play, right? Yeah. And the whole thing is about orchestrating the reunion of Miss Cross and Harold, right? He has recognized that Miss Cross is not right for him, that he's not right, that all of this was about something else, not romantic love like he thought it was, not winning her over like a trophy. He's realized that. Yeah. And so his generous, grand act, instead of being one of seduction, one looking for the plaudits of the world, this entire play at the end, if you think about it, while it's autobiographical, is a selfless act. It is one designed to give space, to give the moment, right, to move Harold and Miss Cross, and give them an opportunity, if they so choose, to reconcile. It is his grand act of stepping aside. Like I love that line, right? That the Latin is a through line in here, right? Sic transit gloria, glory fades, right? And these are men who have been seeking for the entire film, for their entire lives. They've been seeking glory in the most literal sense of that. They want the adulation of others. But here's Max with this play recognizing that the most glorious thing he could do, right, is to help his friends. Our pursuit of glory, our own glory, should not diminish that of others, right? You mentioned earlier the way that Harold Blume's rise had to have been in our American capitalist society on the backs of others. And it's certainly, he's raised these sort of shallow demon children who are locking him out of his own car. It's come at the sake of his marriage. Whatever kind of spark was once there is gone, right? Let alone the way he's maybe exploited his workers, the environment, and all these other ways in which he's built this steel mill and his wealth as a testament to his own glory, right? But glory fades, and our own glory should not come at the expense of others, our fellow countrymen, our supposed loved ones. And that's one of the key lessons about growing up to be a healthy human being, right? It's the difference between being a boy and what I would call a real man. It's the realization, right? That we are connected to others, that one of the best things you can do with your life is to help lift those around you up rather than to step on their shoulders to lift yourself up. One of the most glorious things you can truly do is to elevate those around you, to bring out the best in those around you. And so that whole last play, right, the whole last act of the film, right, is about using our powers to lift these others up. I mean, maybe I'm reading into that, but to me that is the transformative arc. That is the change in Max. He goes running back to Rushmore with that BB gun, and he said, I got some scores to settle. And you think he's literally just going to snipe Magnus, and he shoots him to get his attention from a distance because he thinks if I talk to him face to face, that guy is just going to kick my ass, and so I need to be up in this bell tower to shoot him, and then toss him the script, right? And Magnus says, I always wanted to be in one of your fucking plays. And Max says, I know you did, mate. And they bury the hatchet, right? Like, what is Max doing, right? Again, he's like, he is evolving. He's going through the metamorphosis of little boy who wants to hog the glory for himself to a man who actually is using his talents and skills to elevate others, not to inspire envy, but to say, hey, there's actually enough glory to go around. Yeah?
Yeah. No, I totally buy it up until the thing that got me was at the end when Rosemary asks if he wants to dance, and he's like, no, and then she's like, let's dance. He's like, oh, okay. And he's like, well, let me change the music. And he goes to the DJ and goes, and the DJ holds up this new record and puts in
Ooh La La by the Faces.
Song?
And the chorus is, I wish I knew I wish I knew then or now.
Now. No, I wish I knew then what I know now when I was younger.
He's saying, I wish I hadn't made these stupid mistakes.
I guess, but the manipulation of him getting to dance with her and then having that record in place, that's the part where I'm like, I don't know if he's exactly
a cynical
redeemed, because I don't know why he did it. I don't know why he.
Let's break down that scene.
He had planned it out. It planned out.
Let's break down the scene.
Clever.
Let's wind that back just a little bit, right? So, like, we're in the aftermath of this big play. I love that, by the way, the end of the play, right? Everyone's going wild, like standing ovation, screaming like it's like the Bulls have just won their sixth championship, and Mr. Little Gene is going, he's just cackling with madness. And Bill Murray's got his fist in the air.
Herman Blume is got his fist, and he's just crying.
Right? Because again, that if you think about that play is right. Remember his initial interaction with Bill Murray. One of his initial interactions is he's sitting there talking about how he was in Vietnam, and Max says, "Were you in the shit?"
In the shit.
Yep, I was in the shit. Right, and that's that kernel that sets that whole that ultimately blooms into this play. Blume's life blooms into the play. And so again, like, that whole play is a love letter. It's an ode, an homage to the person who he now regards as his friend, right? He's saying, I see you, I feel you, not just for your money. Think about what most of their interaction was up to this point. Herman Blume is a man I admire for his money. I admire for what he can do to me. I admire for, like, the sort of, like, killer advice he gives me. It's a transactional relationship, like most of the ones in this film. They're transactional, adversarial relationships, right? One of those two. Even Max's own dad, all he knows how to do with his dad for most of the film is take money from him, right? Or say, no, thanks, I don't need the money, right? It's a very transactional relationship.
Yeah.
I'll be home for dinner, right? His dad feeds him TV dinners, right? It's transactional. And so here's something, it's a gift, an homage, an ode. And so then after this play, after that great scene, the standing ovation, I love that. I still get goosebumps at that scene of him openly weeping.
It's great. It's
right?
good.
Openly weeping, right?
Yeah.
Max is dancing with Margaret. He's so happy. They're happy together. For the first time, he's really praising her. Again, talk about a transactional relationship. When he meets Margaret earlier, she keeps trying to introduce herself and talk to him. He keeps basically ignoring her, not even listening to what she's saying, right? He casts her in a play. He's like, you've got the right look. And he tells her she's going to be in the play. She didn't ask to be in the play. He says, we're going to pull you out of your guitar class. That's great. Didn't ask, right? And she sort of, again, she sees something in this guy. She's intrigued. She goes along with this. Again, she's similar in that way to Miss Cross, where she's loving and she's whatever. But now they're kind of, you get the impression together, and they're dancing. And he says, you were that little girl, right? You were that poor girl, right? She really inhabited the role. And he's praising her, not because of what she can do for him, but because he actually sees her as a distinct person, right? Praising her talents, not because he wants anything from her. It's over and said and done, and he's still giving now, emotionally giving. And Mr. Blume walks up, right? And he says, can I dance with your girlfriend, right? Or can I dance with her? And Margaret's initial reaction is, what? I'm spoken for. No, I'm spoken for.
I'm spoken for, yeah.
Effectively, to put it this way, right? I belong to Max. And Max says, actually, no, it's okay. He's my friend. And I think, again, there's a lot of weight in that line. These two men have just spent the last 45 minutes trying to kill each other for the trophy of a woman's affection. Literally, I love this, where Max, this is this great montage to The Who, and the song is they're singing You Are Forgiven, right?
You are forgiven.
Max is in there clipping the brake lines to Harold's car, sicking bees, releasing a hive of bees into his hotel room. Harold is running over Max's bike just to purposely ruin it. Like, they're literally trying to kill each other. And now, after all of this journey, after he's just finally, again, really forgiven Herman and recognized that what he thought he wanted isn't even what he wanted, right? Like, he doesn't want to acquire Miss Cross anymore that way. He's actually happy with this girl who in front of him now is an actual creative partner for him. Maybe the first creative partner he's had, actual partner, who's bringing something to the table, and he recognizes, like, that this is, instead of being transactional, it's an actual partnership where we're making each other better.
Right.
It's okay. He's my friend. Right? And then...
But he doesn't ask her if she wants to dance. He just says... dance with them.
You're
like, you could, like,
I think you're being too hard on the line.
It's overstepping her. No, if she says no, it's not saying,
when she says that, she's looking at Max.
It's saying no, I can't because I can't because of Max. I have to have permission from Max. That's not how I read it. And then Max says, "It's okay. It's my friend." That, I don't know. That still feels.
Look at her body language,
like
Phil.
She's a trophy.
When he says that, right? Like, when Herman asks her, she tenses. She has to be aware on some level of the tension between these two guys, even if she doesn't know the details of it, right?
Right.
And you see her tense, and she's like, "No, I'm spoken for," right? And you could read it, I suppose, as giving permission. But I feel like she's aware of the rivalry between these two. And that's Max basically saying, there is no rivalry anymore. He's my friend. And if you think about what comes from that word, friendship, right? Friend. It's trust. It's the knowledge that, like, there's not going to be a betrayal, that we can share and be open and be merry, and no one is here to take anything. No one is here to do anything wrong to you. So I suppose you could read it. I choose not to read it that way. I'm not going to tell you your interpretation is wrong. But if you watch Margaret's body language there, right? It's a tension because she feels, you're right, in a certain sense, caught. And then Max says, it's okay, he's my friend, and you can see her relax, right? Which leaves now Max facing Miss Cross. And it's true, that record was stashed away. But that record is not one about romance. It's not one about desire. That record is one about, in a certain way, about regret and being old enough to see the error of your ways as a younger person, recognizing that the things you thought were so important back then are not now. I wish I knew then what I know now. You think about it, there's very little that's even like sexy about that song, right? That is I think a record maybe he had stashed for the right moment. He probably told the DJ, keep your eye on me, and when I give you the signal, have that record. Because again, Max, he still has this flair for the dramatic. That's something that hasn't changed. And that is the soundtrack he wants for his reconciliation with Miss Cross. So that they can strip away the creepiness, the transgressions, and that they too can be friends. To me, that's how I read that song. And that dance at the end, where it goes into slow motion, they're looking at each other with friendliness, but not as equals. They're looking each other in the eye as equals. And to me, it's this celebration, right, of when we can strip away the idea that love is conquest, or that the purpose of a friendship is to climb the ladder one step further, right? When we can strip away all of this stuff, right? Look at this triumphant final scene, this tableau of people who were trying to kill each other and disown each other, and they're now dancing as friends. All of them have learned, right? That play wouldn't exist if he hadn't learned from his friends, and it's a tribute to his friends. You know, how much is any one achievement like ours solely, and how much of it is the product of the people around us, right? And greatness is only great when it's shared. It's okay, he's my friend.
Yeah, fair. Yeah,
I don't think the text supports your interpretation.
I think it does. I think you do. I think he does become. I will give you this. I think he does become friends again with Blume, and he writes that play for Blume. I do not think he has matured when it comes to women. Here's the lyrics for Ooh La La. Poor old granddad laughed at all his ways. I thought he was a bitter man. He spoke of women's ways. They'll trap you when they use you before you even know. For love is blind and you're far too kind. Don't ever let it show.
Okay.
The can-can's such a pretty show. Will steal your heart away, but backstage, back on earth again. The dressing rooms are gray. They come on strong, and it ain't too long, for they make you feel a man. But love is blind, and you will find you're just a boy again. This song is about women taking advantage of men.
Is it, or is it about men being blinded by their own desires? I think you could read that song both ways. I see what you're saying. It could, in one light, be about, you know, this old trope of women as seductress, women as whatever. Or is that song about a man in his youth, a boy, being blinded by the flashiness, by the spectacle, by whatever, right? And not having perspective. Right, so there's this flashiness, right? You'll get used, you get swept up by all of this.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the walls of the dressing room are gray. Right.
But for love is blind and you're far too kind, meaning the men are far too kind. Don't ever let it show. They're saying that men are far too kind to these women. They need to be a little bit more restrained. They need to be a little bit more pulled back. I'm reading this.
All right.
These lyrics. Are you not reading
again,
that?
I can read that interpretation. The "you're too kind" could also be the way Max reads that. Max and Harold both read that into Miss Cross. I think we should also be careful about reading the entire interpretation for the film into one line of a song that was written 20 years before the film was recreated. I think.
Hey, I'm just saying there's a reason Wes Anderson is known for picking songs, and there's a reason he picked that song for that
the chorus, I would say, but
Max. So I don't.
Right.
And so while I buy Max Fischer has grown to be a friend and be a better man with other men, I don't know if I buy it with his relationship with women. At least in this film, that's where I
mean, we're going to agree to disagree on that, because I don't see anything apart from, you're right, a reading of that specific line in that song, because his actions and his own words, and honestly, like the whole movie would be pointless. I don't know. It would be. I don't think that's a strong interpretation of this film. I think this movie is about recognizing the futility or the hollowness of seeking trophies, and especially in the form of Miss Cross, right?
I think so too.
The hollowness of seeking women as love, as an act of conquest. And if that's the theme of the film, what you're reading is this weird little thing that this movie that is so pitch perfectly attuned to communicating this idea in its final seconds, because Rod Stewart sings this one line about love being blind. You're telling me that in the last couple seconds this becomes like an episode of The Twilight Zone? Or the end of Mac and Me?
Blume,
the end? Question mark?
I think Blume was successful in his redemptive arc. I don't think Max Fischer 100% was. And that may just be because he's a teenager. That's fine. But I don't think that completely throws out the film. I think you can have this character that's, again, he's a 15. When you're 15, this character is great. But when you're older, this character is a messed up teenager, and you can watch that and be like, yeah, he got better with being friends with like the men and boys in his life, but the women, maybe not. Maybe there's still some growth there.
I'm not saying that he's reached the entire arc of growth, I guess, as a teenager. I wouldn't advocate that, but I do think there's a degree to which he and Harold are the same person, right? We kind of agreed on that premise, right? That they're very similar people at different points in the arc of their lives. And I feel like, again, the lyrics of that song, I wish I knew then what I know now. And here's Harold Blume as an old man learning maybe way too late in his life that the important things are things like friendship and love between partners. Love not as a trophy wife or anything like that, but he's learning that late in his life. And if the premise is that Max Fischer is him in a lot of ways, right? There's all these kinds of references in this film, right? Where, there's some spark and vitality left in old Herman Blume yet, isn't there? And, find something you love and do it for the rest of your life. For me, that's Rushmore. Max is that's something he says. I love that. He's in a high school, right? And his philosophy for life is find something you love and do it for the rest of your life. For me, that's Rushmore. And Harold Blume gives him kind of like this quizzical look, right? Like, but later on, right, when they meet in the graveyard, when Harold and Max meet, Herman and Max meet in the graveyard, right? And Herman says to him, right, she was my Rushmore, Max. And Herman says, yeah, I know what you... Or Max says, yeah, I know what you mean. She was mine too, right? Again, it's this idea of notches in your belt. And it's the symmetry of these two characters. Both of them. He is seeking a woman too young for him in a lot of ways. The other seeking a woman too old for him. They are after this same goal, and it's only when they release, they both learn this lesson. So again, if the premise is the symmetry between these characters, I'm not saying Max is now the perfect human being, the perfect man. But the lyric of the song is, I wish I knew then what I knew now. And so I think the implication there is Harold has been sort of released from this trap because he's shifted his perspective. And so has Max in a lot of ways. They think about what Max's life could be. He's not doomed to become like Harold or Herman. Sorry, I keep saying Harold. Herman, he's not doomed to become Mr. Blume, this sad old man chasing hollow trophies. He knows now, right? He knows then what Harold knows now, right? And so there's this hope. To me, that is the subtext of this movie, that we are all born into this society. We are all born into a society that's telling us that it is all about the likes. It's all about the number of subscribers. It's all about the YouTube trophy behind you, about your number of whatever.
Right.
And it's Max transcending some of that. And to me, that is like literally the hopeful arc. That is the growth of his character. And to negate that,
I still think it's hopeful. Yeah. No, I didn't negate all of it. Phil. I said he's still not with the women, and that's okay for a teenage boy. And I think that song, wish I knew. God, we're so getting into this. But it's literally granddad talking to a younger boy, and younger boy laughing at his ways. I'm saying he's still not 100% convinced of what, what Harold Blume has learned, or now you get me saying it. Herman Blume has learned.
Okay.
I don't think that takes away from Max completely. Again, he's a teenager. He's a teenage boy. He's got a lot on his plate. Obviously, he runs multiple clubs and is getting C minuses in algebra. But it's he has grown. Mm-hmm. That's the arc. He has grown. I don't think at the end of a movie a character needs to be 100% grown to where he is in maturity, even with the problems that are given to him in the movie. If he grows within a couple of those and it's satisfying, I think that's a good movie still.
It is
a great movie. I am not trying to take away from Max here and what he did. I still think Blume learned his lessons because he's an older man. I do not think Max Fischer has, because he's a younger man. He's
Phil,
a boy.
I'm curious. At
15,
this moment, I hear what you're saying. I do hear what you're saying. We should avoid trying to get bogged down into some very pedantic detail. But I think in this moment, Phil,
so we'll have a spin-off podcast called Ooh La La, where the 12-episode arc breaking down the lyrics.
Oh, Phil. I think the only relevant question left is, what did Roger Ebert think of this movie? It's a recurring segment on our show where we consult for reviews of famed film critic Roger Ebert.
Yes.
And Phil, what did Roger Ebert think of the film Rushmore? The film that you and I love, despite whatever minor disagreements we really have about it. Which really, you and I are arguing about the difference between 8:45 and 8:44, right on the clock. We're arguing about a few seconds difference on our watch.
It's weird. This is super film nerd stuff, which I love, and part of me is playing it. I'm
the
playing
heel.
a little devil's advocate.
You're the heel
right
now.
I'm
taking
the heel. I'm
turn.
the heel, and I think I've taken that. I think that's my role in this.
Beating on Urkel, beating on Max Fischer,
or at least. Exactly. Bring those teenage boys over. I'm going to beat the shit out of them because I see myself in them. Exactly.
What did Roger Ebert say about this film back in 1998?
According to Wikipedia, he gave it 2.5 stars out of 4, citing an issue with the film's shift in tone in the final act, stating, quote, "The air goes out of the movie," end quote, in regards to, quote, "stage setting and character development," end quote. I guess I agree with him a little bit on that, but at least with the character development. He further wrote that the film is torn between being structured like a comedy and having, quote, undertones of darker things, end quote, remarking that he wished the film had, quote, allowed the plot to lead them into those shadows, end quote.
I'm not sure what he's getting at there.
I don't know.
I will concede to Roger Ebert that I think one of the things I love about this film, and again, it speaks to you and I were like literally we were teenagers when this movie came out. We were like literally Max Fischer's age when this movie came out. We probably saw it a couple of years later. But it was an era, the late 90s, where these kind of like indie comedies that blended, well, I guess you call them a dark comedy as well. These indie comedies that kind of blended a stylized reality with a quirky and offbeat sense of humor, something that's not your mainstream, broad Hollywood comedy, right? Where these films really kind of rose to prominence. I'm thinking about this movie. I'm thinking about things like by Sofia Coppola, Jason Schwartzman's cousins films like Lost in Translation and The Virgin Suicide. These films that have these darker elements to them, but also have a quirky and lighthearted view of the world. A film like Ghost World is another great example from this approximate era. Yeah. And I'm not sure that kind of stuff, it doesn't seem like Roger Ebert got that, because to me what he's citing there as one of the weaknesses of the film is to me exactly one of the things that makes it so great, that it manages to do so many things so well at once. Yeah, I think that's like a younger... That's a young feeling. So I think that's why we see it from like younger writers and younger directors that during that time, because it is like having this like humor, but then at the same time this darkness that you're starting to come in, like you're becoming a teenager, you're starting to see all this like darkness for the most part. I mean, I know a lot of people a recognition like, of the complexity of the world, right?
Much easier. But you're coming into adulthood a little bit, and you're being given this responsibility, and you're being asked to take this on, this responsibility. But then you also see how messed up adults are, and you're just like, holy crap, I thought you guys had it together. And it's both dark and funny at the same time.
It strikes me that, again, like, it's maybe a weird... I guess it's not a weird comparison. The movie Slacker, right, by Richard Linklater, which we covered in the previous season of this show. Go check that episode out in our archives. It's in our feed. Both he and Wes Anderson are from Texas, and while Slacker is a much more kind of rough-hewn film for budgetary and other reasons, there's also not much in that movie that's out of place. It's a very carefully constructed and carefully scripted film. But it strikes me that, like, whereas Slacker is this kind of underground film festival kind of thing, here you have Rushmore, which, again, is picking up on many of the same kind of themes and ideas, right, about the darkness and complexity of the world, the disillusionment of the youth, the questioning of this capitalist, materialistic, achievement-driven society. Both movies are about that as well. But Rushmore is being distributed by Walt Disney and has a budget of $10 million. And so whereas Roger Ebert might be able to, like, he's also at that point 10 years younger, he might be able to look at something like Slacker and categorize this thing as the work of some stoned punk kid. Here you have Wes Anderson, who is presenting a much more polished product, who is directly in conversation with, recognized film classics, boomer classics like The Graduate, and other great recognized filmmakers. And maybe Roger Ebert just doesn't know what to do with that on a certain level, right? Like, something that looks this nice should be a little bit more easy to file under, C for comedy, right? What shelf do I put this on at the Blockbuster Video? I'm not sure. Which, I mean, I think you get that with the poster too. It's that poster, like,
reminds me of Election.
Yeah,
Day
Election,
or something
which
like
came
that.
out around the
Remember
same time.
that
Another film, I
movie?
think it was like from 98 or 99 as well. And it was also this thing about high school kids, precocious high school kids, and, you know, sort of like,
Yeah.
you know, obviously also acting as a metaphor for many, many poorly behaved adults.
You've got Schwartzman raising his fist up high, and a sea of black and white students behind him, and then next to him is like Bill Murray and or Blume and Rosemary, and then on Schwartzman's sleeve it says "Love, Expulsion, Revolution," and while the first two
So
I
weird.
think are fairly accurate, the revolution I can see that, but also it's not like in the way that I'm.
Well, it's
most
like
people
it's a
think,
much
you know
more
what I mean?
subversive film than that. I would say it's not. It's like a revolution of the heart.
Yeah,
right. A revolution of the heart and the
when
mind.
I read that, I think of when I read that, I think of that movie If.
Yeah.
Have you seen If? It's like
Yeah.
If and ellipses, which is a British movie, and it's about like people in boarding school, and they
That is
have
a very
little
dark film.
revolution.
You and I
of
watched
guns
that
at
together.
the
It's
end
a
of
very
it.
dark film,
And
like a
it's
young Malcolm
very dark
McDowell,
film.
I believe, is in that.
Yeah. That's what I think when I see Love, Expulsion, Revolution. That's what I think Revolution.
I actually don't even remember
but,
a part where Max has his fist in the air within the film. I'm pretty sure that's not.
He doesn't.
Didn't make the final cut.
He doesn't. And I don't think Max is a revolutionary type. I think he's just someone who's trying to. I think he's revolutionary in the fact that he's
an iconoclast.
Not allowing school.
He's an iconoclast.
Yeah,
he's making
exactly.
his own rules, right? And in a certain sense, I guess that's a threat to the established order. But his main concern is not about. Like he effectively he's seeking the approval of the school and his schoolmates, right? He wants to win all of the awards, punctuality and attendance. But at the same time, he's not actually trying to tear that order down. Maybe just reconceive of his place within it. Phil, I love this movie. Who would you recommend?
So I think people.
Who would you recommend this movie to, other than the corpse of Roger Ebert?
I'd recommend this movie to pretty much everyone. I think everyone. Well, I don't know if I'd recommend it to my mom. You know, everyone under.
You know what? I would recommend it to my mom. I'm pretty sure I have, and I'm pretty sure my parents loved this movie. I think there's enough.
I guess I could. I
think there's enough humor and whimsy here. There's enough just strong character work and funny moments that even if, you know, one of the things I love about Wes Anderson is you can walk out of that film and not really be able to articulate on your first viewing, which, let's face it, for many people is probably their only viewing of a film. You can't maybe articulate on your first viewing what the film was about, right? What the moral of the story was. I think this is a film that has taken me 20 years to say that I understand on some level. I'm not going to presume that I have the author's intent in my head fully, but like, I think if you had asked me when I was 16 and saw this movie for the first time, what is this movie about? I'm not sure I could tell you. I feel like I have a better handle on it now.
Yeah, same.
I wish I knew then what I know now. But I would recommend this movie to pretty much anybody because I think it's just there's a, for lack of a better word, there's just a heavy dollop of whipped cream on this movie that just makes it really palatable if you can laugh. And I think there's some great character work. Like, it's just the kind of thing that goes down easy if you're willing to go in. It's a great entry point into the canon of Wes Anderson. I think it's the best place to start. If someone's never seen a Wes Anderson film, this is the film to show them.
I would even say it's probably a great entry point into like independent film in a lot of ways.
I think you could say that too
because it's not too heavy, but it has enough, like, you know, it has like. You know, you talk The Graduate, you talk like it has like French New Wave in there. It has like a bunch of different artistic styles that, you know, you can kind of get your head wrapped around and be like, oh, I like that. Let me go check out, you know, something else.
The shift in tone that Roger Ebert bemoaned. Well, speaking of shifts in tone, Phil, If people would like to delve deeper into the back catalog of this show, if people would like to know more about Pop of the Morning and the dynamic personalities that duke it out every week to make sure their point is understood, how can they enlighten themselves? What can they do to learn more about Pop of the Morning?
They could go to cosmicblair.com, and then they could go to Patreon and support us directly. And we usually have some updates going on there at patreon.com/cosmicblair.
That's right. And if you really want to support the show, maybe the best thing you can do is to tell a friend about it. Word of mouth is one of the most powerful ways to support creators that you appreciate. Tell your friend if they're a fan of Rushmore. Tell your friend if they're a fan of film and of pop culture from the 80s and 90s that you enjoy this show. Refer them to a very specific episode if you think it's a good entry point. Please tell your friends about this show. Again, that's one of the most powerful ways that creative works are supported, that creative works grow, and in which they sustain themselves. Think about a friend, a relative. Let them know about Pop of the Morning.
Share this episode where you can, and maybe have a discussion about the film. It's just a fun thing to do. I think I love talking about pop culture so much. I mean, that's why I started this podcast.
That's exactly right, Phil. Speaking of discussing pop culture, what are we going to be discussing next time on Pop of the Morning?
Oh boy, I forgot to bring that up. Let me see.
I'm getting a message from the ether, and that message is that we're going to be talking about Chasing Amy. Kevin Smith's film from a similar era, I believe 1997, Chasing Amy.
And another semi-independent. This is after Clerks.
This is after Mallrats. This is his third film. It is.
Is this after Mallrats too? Okay. Yeah, but I can't remember. But it's just like 1997 is when that came out, Chasing Amy, and I'm looking forward to. It's been a long time since I've watched Chasing Amy.
It's been a minute for me too, but it was similar to the way that Rushmore was a big movie for us in that period. So too was Chasing Amy, and I can't wait until next time to talk about that movie with you.
Yeah, same. Yeah, this is going to be fun. I'm really excited about checking out Kevin Smith. Another, as you stated, auteur, I suppose.
Yeah, it's good use of the vocab word. Until next time, though. Until that time,
I was nervous about that. I have a hard time with my R's.
Until that,
I used to say burger booger for a long time.
Any more confessionals you'd like to get out?
Not really. No, I'm good. I think I'm at the end of the
until next time on Pop in the Morning, I remain your host and your adoring fan. Are you my fan? I'm Tom.
And I'm Phil. And we'll see you next time on Pop of the Morning. This is my mug. Oh, God.